אני מכנה את הרכב בצד ואני יורד, אני רואה בן אדם שוכב על המדרכה בצד עם דימום רציני מאוד.
הוא נמצא כרגע ביחידה לטיפול נמרץ, הוא מורדם ומונשם, כמו שצוין מצבו קשה מאוד עדיין.
Shots were fired from the inside the house at our officers, who immediately responded and shot and killed the terrorist.
The Muslims understand that they get a prize for the attempt to kill Jews.
הקהילה הבינלאומית צריכה להפסיק את הצביעות שלה ולפעול נגד המסיתים, אלה שמנסים לשנות את הסטטוס קוו.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of the news today. We take you tonight to Jerusalem, where the recent string of events has created a volatile situation and sparked talk of a potential third intifada. The terror attack on October 22nd that left 2 dead set the scene for the clashes that ensued. But it was last night that the escalation went a step further. A Palestinian member of the Islamic Jihad attempted to assassinate extreme right-wing Jewish activist Yehuda Glick. The suspect was later killed and Glick remains in hospital. The Israeli government has since moved to close all access to the Flashpoint Temple Mount or Al-Aqsa Mosque to prevent a further escalation, a move Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas called a declaration of war. Israel announced that it will be open tomorrow, but with age restrictions. U.S. officials are now demanding an urgent reopening of the site. And we will go to our correspondents on the ground this evening in East Jerusalem. That is Tal Shalev, Julia Ginasia, and Amjad Abu Arafeh, and in the Jerusalem hospital, where Glick is being treated. Standing by are Shai Ben Ari, Matthias Invar, and Sami Abu Diab. And joining us in studio to begin this evening is former Israeli ambassador to Egypt, Yitzhak Lebanon. Thank you very much for being with us this evening.
Thank you for inviting me.
And former Israeli intelligence officer Gonen Ben Yitzhak. Thank you for being here, gentlemen. Now we will begin with you, Ambassador Lebanon. Obviously, as we've heard, very strong statements from Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas today, saying that Netanyahu's closure of the Temple Mount or Al-Aqsa Mosque, respectively, is a declaration of war. What do we make of his comments?
Well, first of all, I am sorry for such a declaration. It seems to be that since Abu Mazen spoke for the first time at the podium of the United Nations, speaking about the genocide, it seems to me that, or whether he's doing this in purpose, I mean the inflammatory declarations, or he doesn't ponder, exactly what he's saying, because it is an incitement, it is an inflammatory statement, and I think that he should have refrained from that, because what Israel did this morning, the first step is to close the entrance to anybody, whether it would be Muslims or Jews. It's just to avoid any friction between those two sides and, to save, let's say, the situation. If this is the logic of Mr. Abu Mazen and means that we are going to declare a war against him or Islam, I think that he is totally wrong and he should be refraining from such inflammatory declarations.
And staying with this word choice of his, war, do you think that both sides are really ready for an all-out war, especially considering this summer's operation?
Well, I don't know. The situation, as you mentioned, is volatile in Jerusalem, and not only because of what's happening, but because it is Jerusalem. Secondly, I think that what we are witnessing since 3 months ago, I think that this is a premeditated, in purpose, activity coming from the extremists in East Jerusalem, whether it will be Hamas or Islamic Jihad or people belonging to Palestinian Authority, in order to keep the flame, all the time, burning, and to explain to everybody that, look, Jerusalem is at the core of the problem between Israelis and Palestinians. Don't forget, and we are here. I think that everybody should work to calm down the situation, because it is not beneficial to any of the sides. And I think that primarily Mahmoud Abbas, instead of making such statements, inflammatory statements, exactly, I think that he should go public and say, look, let's calm down the game and let's go back to the table of negotiations, because negotiations are going to be beneficial to reach something which is tangible for both sides.
And looking at it from a security standpoint, Gonan, obviously you have extensive background in security here in Israel. Do you think it was the right decision of Netanyahu to close the Temple Mount? It hasn't been closed for decades like this.
Definitely. I think he had no other option. And I think what Ambassador Lebanon said about getting the situation in hands is what Netanyahu did this morning. Nothing happened. You know, Jews are not allowed to go and pray on Temple Mount. This is a place that we all worship, and Jews are not allowed there. So basically what happened was keeping everybody out of the mount and making sure that nobody will try to use the situation, the very sensitive situation in Jerusalem, in order to push things farther down the road.
Mm-hmm. And before we continue this discussion, we're going to take a look at the reason why the mount was canceled. And I-24 News correspondent Ellie Hockenberg reenacts the assassination attempt last night, step by step.
It was nighttime and Muattaz Hijazi was ready to operate. The plant went smoothly. The victim was identified. Everything was set. 4 bullets later, the streets of Jerusalem are raging again. Like every other day in the past year, Hijazi left his house in the East Jerusalem neighborhood, heading to the center of the city, to where the restaurant he was working at, the Begin Heritage Center. Hijazi works in the restaurant kitchen, allegedly business as usual, but it's very possible that during those hours he had the gun in his possession. Hijazi finishes his shift, but instead of going back home, he waits for Yehuda Glick, knowing he's set to come out of a conference dealing with Jews' right to pray at the Temple Mount with the participants of several parliament members. This is the time to act. Hijazi, wearing the restaurant's black uniform, approaches Glick, asking him to confirm his identity. An eyewitness later reported the attacker saying, "I'm sorry, you got me mad." He shot 4 bullets, severely injuring Glick, and escapes from the scene on a motorcycle. After a long night of intensive work using forensics from the scene and security cameras across Jerusalem, Israeli police and the Israeli Secret Service, or Shin Bet, locate Hijazi. The Israeli SWAT teams arrived at his house, locating the motorcycle in the garage and finding the gun. Hijazi goes to the rooftop and opens fire towards the security forces. A shootout begins, during which Hijazi is shot dead. Hijazi was a former inmate released from an Israeli prison after serving 11 years for terror-related offenses. Police in the Shin Bet security agency knew him as a member of the Islamic Jihad organization. An intelligence officer in the Southern District had reported in the past that Hijazi is a violent, aggressive inmate who was involved in several attacks on prison staff and fellow inmates. When he was released, Hijazi stated his goal is to be a lump in the throat of the Zionist government. And yet, with all of that known, Hijazi worked in a place where many public figures and officials often visit, including the Israeli president and prime minister, who were there even during the last month. Now, for them and the rest of the Israeli security establishment, this incident serves as a wake-up call.
Bringing about the obligation.
And we go now to our correspondent Shai Ben-Ari, who is at the Shaarei Tzedek Medical Center in Jerusalem, where right-wing activist Yehuda Glick is being treated. Good evening, Shai. What can you tell us about Mr. Glick's condition at this time?
Right. Well, we are talking about a pretty serious condition that Yehuda Glick is in. We're talking about the right-wing activist who was the victim of an assassination attempt last night in Jerusalem. We're talking about several pretty serious injuries. We're talking about abdominal injuries. We're talking about intestinal injuries. Also some damage done to the spinal cord, though no neurological damage. We're talking about a pretty serious situation, but from what we understand, there has been a certain stabilization over the past few hours. Yesterday, there was real fear for Yehuda Glick's life. That situation has now become more positive, though he is still in danger. A few minutes ago, I had the chance to speak with Professor Ptachia Reisman, the head of the Department of Surgery here at Shaarei Tzedek. Here's what he had to say.
Fortunately, his life is still in danger. He suffered multiple severe injuries in vital organs, and this is why we are still worried. But as I said, the last few hours, he is more stable, and I really hope that we are now on our way for recovery. It's going to be a very long process. He will stay in the intensive care unit, sedated and ventilated for at least a few more days.
And Shai, obviously following this assassination attempt, what's the security level in Jerusalem right now? Are there fears that more attacks of the sort will be taking place?
Well, certainly with the amount of tension that we're talking about, not just now following this attempt, but over with a number of events in the Jerusalem area over the past few weeks, there is certainly a very large security presence felt currently in the city, especially in the eastern neighborhoods. We're talking about a real attempt by the Israeli government and the security forces to make a show of efforts being made to bring back a sense of security in this city. We're talking about a very volatile situation, which of course can have all sorts of repercussions. We're talking about a special sensitivity around the area of the Temple Mount, of course, with Yehuda Glick's own personal connection to that area. We're talking about a very dangerous situation, which it could easily ignite into something more serious. We're hopeful, of course, everybody is hopeful that things will calm down shortly.
Okay, well, Shai Ben-Ari, thank you very much for these updates live from Jerusalem. And Gonan, as we heard in this report, the suspect did work in a restaurant where Israeli officials frequently dined, and he was a member of the Islamic Jihad, and he had spent time in Israeli prisons. This was a big security breach.
Yes, it is, and you know it happens when we remember the murder of Minister Gandhi in Jerusalem in very similar circumstances. And let's think about the fact that two members of the Knesset were there.
So the Hyatt Regency.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about the Hyatt Regency where Gandhi was murdered, and yesterday in the assassination attempt, the member of the Knesset, Miri Regev, and Feiglin were there. So there was a possibility that he will assassinate two members of the Knesset. And, you know, if we imagine what will happen, you know, what would have happened if he would succeed in something like this. This is a major breach. I don't understand. You know, our president, Rivlin, was in the center for Menachem Begin heritage just maybe a week or 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. You know, somebody needs to think about it. And I also want to mention that Yehuda Glick told the police that he's threatened. And now, you know, the police says, you know, we didn't hear about it, we didn't know about it. It's all over the place. You look at Twitter, Facebook, everything. You see his pictures. You know, somebody closed his eyes before this assassination.
And also something to mention is how quickly they seem to find the suspect. So what goes into something like that when the Shin Bet and Israeli police forces, how do they narrow in so quickly on something like this?
Well, I don't want to get into many details because this can affect, you know, the ability of the Israeli Secret Service to find the next terrorist. But I think it means not only that the security service is very efficient in what it's doing, also here the coin was under the light and it was very easy to find him.
Mm-hmm. You see, Meredith, look, I think that it's very difficult to admit that there is a breach. But I think that you have to be sufficiently courageous to say there is a breach, and a serious breach, and we have to investigate it. Exactly like Gonen said, you know, I mean, we had officials, VIPs, Israelis, you know, dining all the time there. Mm-hmm. And instead of Mr. Glick, we might face, you know, a situation where we're more, it's worse, you know, than that situation. And this is why I think that everybody, or all the Israeli authorities, and more specifically the security authorities, they should really very fast, you know, check all these points and investigate what happened in order to avoid it in the future. This guy was known. He was in prison, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And he was there. He was working for a while. And the same evening he was there. He finished his shift, you know, and he went out. So I think that this merit, you know, to be investigated by the authorities, and the sooner is the better.
And also, I mean, obviously, security concerns here at the moment, but diplomatically, Israel, what should Israel do to calm down the situation at the moment?
Well, look, first of all, I think that the Prime Minister said rightly that we are a little bit, you know, disappointed from the international community because nobody, you know, condemns such kind of act. Probably because this is a right-wing activist, but he's still, an Israeli, he's Jewish, and it is an attempt of assassination in the heart of Jerusalem. I think, if it was the opposite, I think that the whole international community, they will condemn why Israel is killing Palestinians, etc. So there is a kind of hypocrisy here that I think that we should point it out publicly and to say, look, we expect the international community to do something. Secondly, I think that we should ask the international community, and more specifically our friends, the Americans and the Europeans, to put pressure on the President Mahmoud Abbas. Stop incitation. The incitement, he has to be stopped completely. He cannot go on, with these inflammatory statements. 2 weeks ago when he said, we should not permit the Israelis to go into the Temple Mount by all means. This guy understood that the all means is also a revolver or a gun. So he should be more careful. He is the president, and he bears a certain responsibility, not only for his own people, but in the region and internationally also. So the international community has to put pressure on him.
And joining the conversation now is Errol Margalit, member of the Israeli Parliament and chairman of the Parliamentary Task Force for the City of Jerusalem. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Now, you have a lot of experience in Jerusalem. What's the atmosphere there, especially in East Jerusalem, and do you think this will escalate any further?
Well, I think a lot of what will happen in the next few days is up to the leadership, both the national leadership of the respective parties and also the local leadership. And I think that a call should be issued by both the Israeli Prime Minister, the head of the Palestinian Authority, the Arab leaders, and the international leadership, is that Jerusalem is a city of diversity. It's a city that is holy, of course, to us, to the Jews. It's a city that's holy to the Christians, to the Muslims. We have been having cooperation in Jerusalem in a very productive sense over the last few years. And I don't know if you recall, but, in 2002, it was very difficult in Jerusalem. In 2002, darkness was in the air. And I think that over the last 10 years or so, we have been able to build new initiatives, which are both business initiatives, social initiatives, cultural initiatives, that are speaking of a city that is not only worrying about its borders, like the political leaders are, but it's also trying to project a creative sense in terms of its content. Mm-hmm. Because this is the center of excellence for the Jewish people, but we would like it to be a center of excellence for the Palestinian people and for the international community as well.
And do you think that Netanyahu is doing enough to quell the current tensions?
Well, obviously I'm from the opposition, and we do have, we do have some criticism. I was working with the mayor, the legendary mayor of Jerusalem, Teddy Kollek, many years ago, and I remember that we were able to build in Jerusalem, and I think that the Israelis have the right to build because it's a thriving city. It's a city that needs, to allow both its Arab and its Jewish citizens the opportunity to expand and to live there. But I think we also need to do it in a way that is sensitive to both communities. And I want to say that, those terror organizations that want to use Jerusalem as their ground to escalate things, to that we will say an absolute no. And Israel will do anything it can, both the coalition and opposition, to stop any form of violence. And on the other hand, I think that we need to, to issue a call to the Arab community, that we are interested in, in the pluralism of the city. We are respecting, every form of life. People in the world need to understand that they hear about Jerusalem at the time of the crisis, that most daily life in Jerusalem is about cooperation. Cooperation on the business side, cooperation on the social level, and we'd like to maintain it rather than to, light a fire under the passions that will go in the wrong way. We would like the cooperation to thrive, and we'd like the calmness to come back to our streets.
Well, as you said, there's certainly a lot of passion in this city. Errol Markley, thank you very much for speaking with us. And Gonen, I'd like to just consider perhaps the task that Israeli security forces face when dealing with tensions on the Temple Mount. Obviously, they're dealing with Muslim worshippers and Jews, but we also saw in reaction to the assassination attempt a lot of right-wing activists becoming pretty violent today. So what sort of issues do they face when dealing with hostile people from both sides?
Well, first of all, it's very obvious that Temple Mount is a place where it is very easy to inflame all the Middle East, and people use it. Some right wings, that extremists that try to do things. Remember, the terror cell in the 80s. They had some ideas about blowing up the Al-Aqsa Mosque and so on. And I think what Abu Mazen just did the last few days is maybe surrounding to the mob in the way he talks about Temple Mount, when he knows that he can just get Jerusalem into flames. And maybe, this is what he wants. Maybe this is, for him, this is a way, to bring all the attention to the Palestinian issue and to his ideas, but he's playing a very dangerous game. Now, the problem was that for many years Israel tried, to compromise with everybody, to let Jews go on the Temple Mount without praying, letting the Waqf do whatever he wants in Temple Mount, to destroy everything. Every evidence to our heritage in Temple Mount, and now basically we need to deal with the consequences of what happened. Israel needs to maintain law everywhere, in Temple Mount, in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem. This is something that we didn't do for the last maybe 10 or 20 years. Mm-hmm. And this is the price. And the assassination attempt, are we looking at a lone killer? And how do you predict these circumstances? Well, in one sense, you can say, maybe, of course, I don't know exactly what happened, but maybe he's a guy that walked alone and decided, to do something. But if we think about it, he is a member of the Jihad Islami. He heard what Abu Mazen said about do everything to protect Temple Mount. This is something that they are talking about for many years. Not only Abu Mazen. Abu Mazen, is just replying things that other people say. I remember Hassan Youssef, a member of Hamas, going to Temple Mount just maybe 2 years ago, and talking in a very harsh way about the way all Muslims needs to react against Israel. So this could just be an individual reacting to insightful statements from leaders within. Yeah, and maybe maybe he had some help. This I don't know. Mm-hmm. Well, we will be coming back here, but we go now live to East Jerusalem, where our diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev is standing by. Good evening, Tal. We do understand that you're in the neighborhood where this apparent suspect was killed. What is the atmosphere there right now? What can you report?
Well, good evening, Meredith. At the moment, it is quite calm here at the Abu Tor neighborhood. There are periodical and occasional disruptions. We do see groups of youngsters here down in the streets getting ready, or at least showing their presence. And there's also a very heavy military presence. And since this morning, early dawn, when hundreds of Israeli policemen actually cornered down on Muatis Hijazi, the suspect in the assassination attempt of Yehuda Glick, on his house, since early this morning, there has been periodical and occasional disruptions and clashes between angry residents, and the Israeli security forces, mainly here in the Abu Tor neighborhood and also in the Old City. But the Israeli government and the Israeli leadership today this evening does try to bring down the tensions, or lower the tensions and lower the flames, and does announce that after one day that the Temple Mount compound was closed, tomorrow it will be reopened for Muslim prayers ahead of the Friday prayers in the in Al-Aqsa compound. This is an attempt to try and restore the status quo on the Temple Mount and try and bring down the flames. One of the things that the Israeli Prime Minister did say that he wants call on both sides to do this morning when he held a special security consultation on the issue.
I see. Well, Tal Shaleva, thank you very much for these comments from East Jerusalem. And Ambassador Lebanon, as she mentioned, tomorrow the site will be reopened, but this is Friday prayers, and historically these are times of tension. Can we expect a lot of tension tomorrow?
Well, I don't know. I cannot predict, but I would like to share with you some personal thoughts about, this praying in the temple in Al-Aqsa. I have traveled in several countries in the Arab world, and I have seen prayers on Friday. There is no such kind of numbers as we see in Al-Aqsa. More than 100 and 150 every Friday praying in the esplanade of the temple of Al-Aqsa. This is something exceptional. And if this happened, it is only because the Israeli security permitted, protected, give the chance to these people to do it. So I think that those people coming from East Jerusalem should be grateful that they have the chance in such numbers to come and to pray. Secondly, what happened is just, we shut down for 24 hours, no more than that, to avoid, and to protect both sides, Israelis and Arabs. And tomorrow morning is going to be open. So it doesn't...
So why are these reactions so harsh?
That's it. This is exactly what I'm saying. There is no justification from the Palestinian side, and more specifically from Abu Mazen, to go so harsh against Israel and saying, that this is a declaration of war. This is a declaration of war when I am protecting you. The third point is, we have to bear in mind, and I think that we should be very clear on that point, the Temple Mount, the esplanade of the Temple Mount, the whole compound, is a site of worshiping. And I think that we should allow everybody to go and to pray freely. We have a law in Israel for the freedom of worship.
And if tomorrow, including Jews as well?
Everybody. If tomorrow morning I have a Muslim coming from Akko, and he would like to go and to pray, why he cannot do it? Because he's an Israeli? Or he bears an Israeli identity card? And if somebody, a Christian, would like to go and to make some tourism, in the Temple Mount, they would like to see the people, how they are praying on Friday. Why not give him, that chance? This is a sacred place, a place of worship, and everyone. Because when I was in the Al-Aqsa, I saw people coming from Pakistan, from Malaysia. They have the right to come and pray, and an Israeli Arab don't have the right to pray in Al-Aqsa. Something is peculiar here coming from the Palestinian side in East Jerusalem. I think that they should understand, that this is a very important place for everybody, and it should be open to everybody. And definitely, we have to avoid that the two extremist sides, Israelis and Palestinians, not be there.
I think that is a very appropriate point to finish on. Ambassador Lebanon and Gonen Ben Yitzhak, thank you both very much for being here this evening. We are going out for a 2-minute break. Do stay tuned for more of this special edition of the News Today.
אני מכנה את הרכב בצד ואני יורד, אני רואה בן אדם שוכב על המדרכה בצד עם דימום רציני מאוד.
הוא נמצא כרגע ביחידה לטיפול נמרץ, הוא מורדם ומונשם, כמו שצוין מצבו קשה מאוד עדיין.
Shots were fired from inside the house at our officers, who immediately responded and shot and killed the terrorist.
The Muslims understand that they get a prize for the attempt to kill Jews.
הקהילה הבינלאומית צריכה להפסיק את הצביעות שלה ולפעול נגד המסיתים, אלה שמנסים לשנות את הסטטוס קוו.
Welcome back to the special edition of the News Today, where we are focusing on Jerusalem, the city that has become the flashpoint of recent tensions between Israelis and Palestinians. In the last 24 hours, the assassination attempt of a right-wing activist's life and the subsequent killing of the suspected killer has added new fuel to the flames of the conflict. And joining me now to discuss this further is Dr. Ghassan Abdullah, director of the Center for Applied Research in Education. Thank you for being with us this evening. And Yoram Sheftel, attorney and right-wing political activist. Thank you very much for being here.
I'm not a political activist at all. I'm a radio broadcaster, yes. But,
radio broadcaster.
But not a political activist.
We will go with this. But our first question is to you, Mr. Sheftel. Is the third intifada upon us?
I don't think so. I think there is a certain tension. I think certain sections of the Arab mob are busy with throwing stones and worse than throwing stones, killing, murders, but not on a scale that you can call it in Arabic intifada, in my language Oslo War, because all this is direct result of the Oslo Accord, or as I called it, the crime of Oslo, the crime against the Jewish people, of course. But I don't think we are there, and I don't think we will get there. I'm positive that this government will respond properly in various measures.
What is the proper response, in your opinion, to the current tensions?
To use much more police force, much more vigilant arrest without release till the end of the criminal proceedings, to deploy in every spot which is known to be a spot for stone throwers, to deploy enough police force to stop it. And all this can be done. Jerusalem is 47 years under the Israeli control, all of it. And as in, I would say, 98% of the time, we had peace and quiet, as far as there were no stone throwing, no attempts to kill and murder and so on. I'm fully convinced that this can last another 408 years.
Dr. Abel, I'd like to hear your response to this.
Actually, I'm really shocked that my cousin, who might be a grandfather, is looking that the solution is to use more police force and so on. It seems that, my cousin, you are totally, either you are ignoring the reality or you don't dare to face the reality.
I was today in Jerusalem.
Excuse me. What's going on in Jerusalem is not a matter of just like this. It is a reaction against the ongoing frustration and oppression to the Palestinians in East Jerusalem. Look at the educational situation, look at the economical situation, look at the health situation, look at demolishing. There are 20,000 apartments in East Jerusalem who received orders for demolishing.
Because they were illegally built.
Please, when you talk legally and illegally, this is another issue, okay? So this is the main reasons behind that. If you are talking about legal things, I'd like to tell you what I have heard from the Palestinians today in Jerusalem. An old man said it in Arabic. I translate it for you. When injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty in East Jerusalem. This is what an old man in his 73 years old, whose house was demolished, said it today in Arabic.
So
okay?
he said it.
If you allow me, please, if you allow me. I think I agree with you that the Palestinians do not want at all a third intifada. And let's go back to the war on Gaza. 51 days the war lasted on Gaza, and the Palestinians in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem did not flame an intifada. Why? Because this is another proof that the Palestinians are totally complied to the peace strategy that they adopted.
But Dr. Abel, I would like
to interject. The last sentence that I'd like to tell you is that neither the police force nor the closure of Al-Aqsa, none of these Israeli behaviors will settle down the issue. What's needed is to respond to the needs of the Palestinians in East Jerusalem. And today, Mr. Netanyahu said it. Just before I came, I read it in the news that he said there should be calming to the situation in East Jerusalem without giving any side the right to lose law in his hand. I think the Israeli parties are now in a situation like what was in Tel Aviv 2-3 days ago, the motorcycling race. They are in a competition who's going to win. The Israelis more and more. They are looking for first personal benefits, second parties benefits, and they are ignoring totally the benefits and the future of the Israeli community. Each wants to win
I would like
in
to
the
hear
elections.
your response, Mr. Shafta.
Yes, I think although I'm accused for not seeing the correct picture and the correct reality, that Mr. Ghassan is totally out of any reasonable sight of what's going on. What's going on is that an Arab mob tries time and again to stop Jews from coming to the Mount Temple and to stop Jews for not only praying there, but even visiting there. They're using the Aqsa Mosque as a place to accumulate stones in order to throw them on policemen and on Jewish visitors. And when the police respond with not enough force, because the system that should be used against Arab rioters is as follows. When Arab mob throw stones at the Temple Mount, it shouldn't be closed for Jews. It should be closed for Arabs.
Kazan.
They are the one that want to change the status quo, which I want to say bluntly is totally unacceptable, because it's totally unacceptable that Jews will be not allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. Totally, and it will not continue for a long time.
What is your response to extreme right-wing Jews who would like to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque in order to build a new temple?
First of all, the Aqsa Mosque is not situated in the place where the second temple was. Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't be and need not to be destroyed in order to build the temple, which will be built. In order to build the temple, we have to destroy, and this is a fair compromise. Aqsa Mosque will stay, and the Omar Mosque will go.
But it will cause chaos nevertheless.
Oh
so
God.
What? We Jews should not be refrained for fulfilling the most important Jewish aspiration, which we were davening, praying for 2,000 years, to rebuild the temple in the mountain temple, which Mahmoud Abbas has the chutzpah to deny that the second temple ever existed in the Temple Mount.
Excuse me, just I would like not to comment on what you have said emotionally and to go with your allegations, okay? Just I'd like you to go back and read archaeological studies done by Jewish archaeologists from Tel Aviv University who have proven that there is nothing related to the Jewish religion in Al-Aqsa. I listen to you, okay? Yeah. I listen to you. You can...
You deny the Holocaust as well. I mean, not you, Mahmoud Abbas.
Wait.
The same person that said that it was not second temple denied the Holocaust as well.
If you want to have the dialogue, please listen. Yeah. I respected you and I listened to you. Yeah. No Palestinian denies the Holocaust. No Palestinian denies the Holocaust.
Mahmoud Abbas is the only person on earth which has a doctorate of denying the Holocaust and accusing the Zionists for
rumors.
Collaborating with the Nazis for killing 1 million
I'm totally
Jews.
astonished and surprised that you are a broadcaster and you interrupt in this way. Okay? I don't want you to follow rumors. I'd like you to go and read his PhD dissertation.
I read.
If you give me one word that Mahmoud Abbas in his dissertation denies the Holocaust, I'll give you $10,000 US.
When you say that in the Holocaust,
gain $10,000. Okay.
When you say that only 800,000 Jews were murdered in the Holocaust, and they were murdered in collaboration between Zionists and Nazis, this is worse than denying the Holocaust.
We will be coming back to the studio soon. Gentlemen, we must move on and show this story.
Chomsky is an anti-Semitic Jew.
Will you please let me continue? We will be coming back to this very heated debate. The Temple Mount, let's take a look, has been one of the most contentious points in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as we've seen since the Second Intifada of the year 2000. But the holy site has also seen an extraordinary history of aggression. Ayman Siksek takes a look back at the region's most constant setting for volatile clashes.
The Temple Mount is once again a major item on the social and political agenda in Israel. Years of modern conflict have led to Wednesday night's attack on the site. In 1969, 2 years after the Six-Day War brought East Jerusalem under Israeli control, the holy site withstood one of the most infamous attacks in modern history. An Australian citizen set fire to Al-Aqsa Mosque, claiming to be acting upon divine instructions. The criminal, Dennis Michael Rohan, was tried and found to be mentally unstable and was later deported from Israel. But unrest ensued nonetheless in the streets of Jerusalem, with numerous demonstrations in the Old City escalating to clashes with police. Since then, the holy site has been a recurring setting for both political presence and civil uprising. In 2000, would-be Prime Minister Ariel Sharon visited the Temple Mount in a much scrutinized move. Though Sharon rose to prominence soon after the visit, turmoil erupted again in the area, with Palestinians seeing the move as provocative. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, headed by Yasser Arafat, took advantage of the momentum, and the Second Intifada erupted shortly after. The effects of the Second Intifada are still alive in the memories of both Israelis and Palestinians, making the recent violent clashes in the Temple Mount particularly worrying for the region. In recent years, the religious significance of the Temple Mount was the backdrop to a battle of a different kind, with Israel conducting historic excavations in the surrounding area. The operation to uncover the Jewish history of the site has again fueled claims of attempts of appropriation by the State of Israel. The site is managed by an Islamic law official, and Israel restricts the access of Jewish worshippers to the site for fear of religious clashes. The access of Palestinians to the site is also tightly restricted, resulting in limited access for both Jewish and Muslim believers, and an ongoing sentiment of frustration for both sides.
And now we're back in studio. Yeah. Dr. Abdallah, I would like to address you. First of all, obviously, as we've seen from this report, and as we know, the Temple Mount or Al-Aqsa Mosque, respectively, is a very volatile place. Now, I want to address Abbas's words today, calling Netanyahu's closure of the place a declaration of war. Is this not fuel to the fire because it was closed to Jews, Muslims, Christians, whoever? And as we saw, right-wing Jewish activists were very violent today. Imagine if it had been open, and imagine if both sides had gotten to each other. So why is Abbas possibly inciting the situation even more?
If I were you, I should judge not the words said by Mahmoud Abbas. I should judge the ongoing violations started by the Israeli government against Al-Aqsa and against the Palestinians in East Jerusalem. Mahmoud Abbas just said what he said, and this is totally true, because unfortunately the present Israeli government with such Israeli political parties in it are turning the conflict into a religious conflict.
But we have to also understand why the site was closed today is because of an assassination attempt on a Jewish right-wing activist's life by a Palestinian.
I think the Al-Aqsa was closed today because the Israeli government did not want to get into direct confrontations, neither with the settlers nor with the Palestinians, Muslims and Christians in Jerusalem. This is one thing. Second thing, this is not the solution.
Was this the right step, do you believe?
Sorry?
Was it the right step to
No, not at all. Not at all. Al-Aqsa was never closed at all in the history, and this is the first time that the Israeli government closes Al-Aqsa since the occupation in 1967. This is not the solution. The solution is to end all sources of conflict. But what the Israeli government these days are doing with the political parties and the Jewish fundamentalists are doing, they are turning the conflict into a religious conflict. And the time that it is a religious conflict, then it's not for the benefit and for the sake of Israel as a state and the Israeli people. And to support my saying, let's look at the global responses against what Israel has been doing in Jerusalem and the declaration of the 1,000 settlements in Jerusalem. And let's look at what Sweden has announced today.
And Mr. Sheftel, your reactions to this?
Well, first of all, who turns the conflict to a religious one is, of course, the Arabs, which from religious, fanatical point of view, refuse to recognize that Jews have the right, the religious right, first and foremost, to pray in the most holiest site to Judaism, which is the Temple Mount, where two temples stood for 1,000 years, except for 70 years of the diaspora in Babylonia. That's first of all. Second, in order to restore calm, you must show that who disturb the calm, that who provoke the unrest will be punished and will not be able to continue doing what he wishes to do, that is to say, to establish a religious war.
Yes,
and this is one second. And this is
this point I agree with you. The Palestinians are the one who makes the incursions to Al-Aqsa. The Palestinians are the ones who kidnapped Muhammad Abu Khdeir. The Palestinians are the ones who tried to kidnap other 9 children. The Palestinians are the ones who demolish houses and arrest and confiscate
the Palestinians are the murderers who murdered cold-bloodedly a 3-year-old baby. The Palestinians are the ones that murdered 1,700 Israelis.
How many Palestinians were killed by the Israelis? Tell me, is there a day or a moment that Israeli settlers do not kill or do not shoot or do not make knocked down by their cars, Palestinian children?
The Israeli settlers are victims.
Are victims?
Are victims.
Please.
Victims of
Arab. I do sympathize with them. They are victims.
What
are they doing?
Violence.
What are they doing?
They're coming back to our land.
It's not your land.
This is our land.
This is a lie. Big lie.
Judea and Samaria is more Jewish than Petah Tikva, Tel Aviv, Haifa, Ramle, and Lod.
You said this about Amit, and you evacuated Amit.
Listen.
You evacuated Amit.
Amit?
Yes,
Yamit?
The settlement in Gaza, nearby Gaza.
In Sinai?
We never. Yamit was never part of the land of Israel.
Wait.
But Judea and Samaria is. In Yamit, there were not 400,000 Jews.
Go back
and
to
by
history.
the end of this decade, we will have more than 1 million Jews in Judea and Samaria.
You can allegate whatever you want.
Can we please gather ourselves for a moment? We are obviously playing the blame game here. This is very common in these types of debates. What can happen to quell this? What can happen to quell? What can both sides do to improve the situation?
This is a very important question. I think the only outlet is to sit down together, Palestinians and Israelis, to find a sustainable compromise. A compromise that responds to the needs of both sides, and not just to fatten settlements and keep confiscating and ignoring the international community's requirements. The only outlet, as I said, is negotiations and reaching a sustainable compromise.
But it seems that the trust has
violence
been so
will lead,
damaged.
Violence will lead to violence.
The trust between the two sides has been so damaged.
Yes.
What will encourage Palestinians to put down their stones who are demonstrating against Israeli security forces who are armed? What will make this happen? Who will put down first?
Thank you. What the Palestinians want is not to put down their stones. They want to see the settlers and the army put down their guns against them. This is one thing. Second thing, the Palestinians want to see serious commitment from the Israeli side to the negotiations according, look, in the last 9 months of negotiations, let me remind you and remind him. During the 9 months of negotiations, 8,000 units were built in the settlements.
Not enough.
4,000 dunams were confiscating. Look, all these settlements, one day, if we meet, I will assure you that they will go away.
Look, many Arabs assuring that Israel one day will go away.
No, this is not my dream.
You wish very well
cousin,
that will happen.
Cousin, don't put words on my lips. I did not say this.
Look,
you said it.
The Jews,
I'm talking about the settler.
We, the Jewish people, say that prophecy after the destruction of the second temple was given only to fools. So I suggest you to prophesy the future and let's concentrate on the present. Let's talk about,
without ignoring history.
Let's talk about for one moment the compromise in Mount Temple. What can be more fair settlement that Al-Aqsa,
don't dream
he doesn't
at
even
all.
let me. He wants to negotiate. He won't let me say.
Al-Aqsa is a Muslim Islamic place.
Yeah.
You have no right
the
in
Mount
Al-Aqsa.
Temple is 100% Jewish, but me as a Jew, I'm ready to recognize the Arab aspiration of the Temple Mount. Therefore, I'm fully ready that the mosque, that Al-Aqsa Mosque will stay in the place it is,
you are not doing
and
a favor.
will be a place of worship to Muslims from all over the world.
You are not doing a favor. This is the reality. Al-Aqsa is a Muslim place
also
only.
the temple will be built, and there will be
yourself.
a temple, and there will be an Aqsa Mosque, but an Arab extremist had the chutzpah even to call me his cousin. He wants to eliminate the Jews from the Temple Mount, and he's talking about talks and settlement and fairness and so on. You are an Arab extremist using the most disgusting lies a person can use by saying that there was never a temple, two temples on the Temple Mount.
This is according to what I read. Israeli archaeologists from Tel Aviv University. Go and read. I advise you to go and read.
What is the Western Wall? What is the Western Wall?
It is Al-Buraq Wall.
Yeah, it was built yesterday.
It is Al-Buraq Wall.
Yeah, Al-Buraq Wall. Yeah,
it is Al-Buraq Wall.
Look, this is...
You will not, as Israeli, you will not gain one thing from such allegations and from cheating your people that you have the right in Al-Aqsa.
Okay, gentlemen,
we don't have the right in Al-Aqsa. We have the right on the Temple Mount, and Al-Aqsa is outside the Temple Mount.
Both of your opinions.
It's not in the place where the Temple Mount was.
I advise you to go and read.
Please don't advise me, and please, and more important, don't call me your cousin.
Gentlemen, please.
I don't like lies in my family.
Okay, gentlemen, we have heard what you...
I don't like liars in my family.
This is racism. This is racism.
Dr. Abdullah,
this is racist, and this is anti-Semitic. This is anti-Semitic.
Can we please just diffuse this?
93% of the Arabs in Judea and Samaria has anti-Semitic stigmas about Jews.
Gentlemen,
93%.
We must move on. Gentlemen, Dr. Abdullah, respectively, we must move on, both of you. We've obviously heard what your thoughts are about this, but we also ask people in Jerusalem if the Temple Mount should be open to worshippers of all religions. Let's see what they had to say.
Al-Aqsa is historically important for Muslims only. I want to stress this.
No, it's a holy site for Muslims and should stay that way.
No, the State of Israel has a political agenda for the Temple Mount.
Yes, all worshippers will be able to enter.
The church is for Christians and Al-Aqsa is for Islam.
Okay, so we've heard what people in the area are saying about this issue. Now, Dr. Abdullah, do you agree that Jews should have no access to the Temple Mount or Al-Aqsa Mosque?
We have to differentiate between Al-Aqsa and the other parts of Jerusalem. Nobody can deny that the Jews do not have roots in Jerusalem. Nobody can deny this. Historically, the Jews were there in Jerusalem, and as they were there in the historical Palestine. But Al-Aqsa is not a Jewish area. It's not a Jewish place.
But it
and
is,
I think
it is one of the holiest sites in Judaism. It is one of the holiest sites in Judaism.
It is unbelievable.
So
I mean, this why for Muslims coming Daesh, coming all the terror that exists on earth. Because the
you
Muslims...
are talking emotions.
I'm not
okay?
talking emotions, I'm talking
academic.
facts.
I'm talking academic.
I'm talking
as an
facts.
academic person.
Yes, and I asked you a question.
Daesh is a fact, it's
you
not
have
emotion.
The Daesh. You have the Daesh in here.
Definitely.
You have the Daesh.
We would
the
like
one
to
who
hear
kills
his response.
children.
Please, can we please hear your response?
My response is built on academic studies done by Israeli archaeologists from Tel Aviv University. You see, I'm not depending on illusions or allegations, okay? They have these archaeological works done for years and years, decades, and they came out with the conclusion that Judaism have nothing to do with this area.
No,
it's not my.
I mean, that's
it's not my words.
No, it's your
These are
lies.
not my
it's
words.
not your words. It's your lies.
It's not my
it's
lies.
Your lies.
Don't
you are a liar.
Be respectful. Don't use such terms.
Look, you are a blunt liar. A person
you are more than a blunt liar.
We are running out of time.
You are ignorant.
Gentlemen,
because
we are
you
running out of time.
I'm sorry to tell you are ignorant.
This is why Daesh and Al-Qaeda
you have Daesh in your mind. You are a Daesh.
Gentlemen, this has just become a name-calling arena. This, unfortunately, we don't have any more time left to the program. Thank you very much, both of you, for being here. Mr. Shekto, Dr. Abdallah, for being here and having such a heated debate, obviously reflecting the passions of the issue. We are going out for a 2-minute break. Stay tuned for more of this special edition on the News Today. See you soon.
Today, the government of Sweden has decided to recognize the state of Palestine.
We're sorry about the last statement of Prime Minister of Sweden. We think it's really a wrong approach.
We believe that this is support for a peace process and negotiations.
نحن إذ نرحب بهذا الإعلان نحن نقدم الشكر لحكومة السويد للشعب السويدي والمملكة السويد على هذا الإنجاز.
Welcome back to the special edition of the News Today. Following Sweden's full recognition of a Palestinian state, Israel's foreign ministry has recalled its ambassador to Stockholm. In response to the move, Israeli Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman said the decision was unfortunate and that it only strengthens extremists. With me now is Yariv Oppenheimer, Director General of Peace Now. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And Dr. Martin Sherman, Executive Director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Thank you also for being here. But first, we will have a look as Sweden today became the first European Union member to officially recognize Palestinian statehood on a governmental level. This decision comes following a wave of international pressure, which has been focused on the Israeli government for a number of policy decisions. And as we've heard, in response, Israel has recalled its ambassador to Stockholm. I-24 News reporter Shai Ben-Ari has more.
It could hardly be termed a surprise. The Swedish government announced Thursday it had recognized a Palestinian state.
Today, the government of Sweden has decided to recognize the state of Palestine. We have decided to do so on the basis of the fact that the criteria of international law are fulfilled. There is a territory, a people, and a government.
Beyond the legal criteria, the foreign minister also mentioned the government's practical reasons for the decision.
We've seen an escalation of settlements and violence in Jerusalem and on the West Bank. We have also seen a radicalization of many young people who actually have only two choices, either accepting the situation as it is or taking to violent methods. And we believe that this is support for a peace process and negotiations.
Sweden is the first member of the European Union to recognize Palestinian statehood on a governmental level, though earlier this month the British Parliament also passed a non-binding resolution recognizing Palestine, with the Irish Parliament passing a similar motion a week later.
There are clearly signs that this might happen in other member states as well, and they will just choose the right, what they think is the right moment.
Israeli Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman was typically blunt in its reaction to the Swedish decision, remarking on Facebook that Sweden needed to understand relations in the Middle East are more complex than one of IKEA's flat-pack pieces of furniture. The Palestinian Authority was quick to applaud the step, with spokesman Nabila Burudena claiming the Swedish decision came in response to recent Israeli measures in East Jerusalem, including the Netanyahu government's decision to move forward with plans for thousands of new Jewish housing units in predominantly Arab neighborhoods. Indeed, plans for construction in East Jerusalem were also the focus of a UN Security Council meeting Wednesday called by Jordan.
Israel, the occupying power, must be demanded to cease immediately and completely its illegal settlement activities throughout the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem.
The people of Israel are not occupiers and we're not settlers. Israel is our home, and Jerusalem is the eternal capital of our sovereign state.
With a volatile state of affairs in Jerusalem, one key question is if the international community's reactions to the events will diffuse or escalate the situation on the ground.
Now, Dr. Sherman, we will turn to you first. Do you believe it was a smart move on Israel's behalf to recall its ambassador to Sweden?
Well, I think that's small potatoes compared to what they should have done. I think what Israel should have done, and I've written about this in my column in the Jerusalem Post in the last year, I think Israel should say to the Palestinians, you want to be independent? Be my guest. No water, no electricity, no postal services, no fuel, no port services, no communication services, and let's see how you last.
I would like to hear your response to that.
First of all, I think that the government of Israel is having a difficult time, not just with Sweden, but also with the United States. We just saw what happened this week. And if this is the way of Israel to isolate Iran, so the opposite is going on here, and we are isolating ourselves. And we can blame and we can make jokes about IKEA, but eventually Israel is becoming much less acceptable around the world. And the fact that the occupation is part of the Israeli policy, this is unacceptable around the nations that's supposed to be friends of Israel. And regarding the idea of just to disconnect from the Palestinians will say yes to this kind of initiative with one term, that they will have the all sovereignty to develop water systems and electricity systems and ports and airports like any other state. I'm not so sure that this is what you are meaning about it. And by the way, regarding the water, who is taking the water? We are taking much more water than them from the West Bank.
On the issue of water, I really suggest you don't take me on, because that is the biggest hoax. And I don't want to divert the debate from Sweden to water. But that is completely false. The situation of the Palestinians with regard to water has improved beyond all recognition under Israeli instruments.
More than what they are getting.
You know, excuse me. A billionaire in a penthouse in Manhattan uses much less water than a billionaire in Beverly Hills who's got a big garden. It's not a matter of supply. When a Palestinian turns on his tap, there's water in, unless the Palestinians themselves have turned the water off.
But I think that when we look at the political and the diplomatic position in which Israel is now, this is the symptom of the heart attack. We feel that we are having difficulties to breathe. We need more. We feel some pain, but we say it's nothing. And unless we will get into the point in which the world will say to Israel, enough, we are ready to accept and to support the idea of Zionism. We are ready to accept and to support the idea of Israel as a Jewish state, democratic state, but we cannot support a Jewish, democratic and occupying state. This is too much for us. And if you will not stop the occupation, we will not have any choice but to start to disconnect ourselves from you. This is something that we don't want. The other alternative is that instead of recognizing Palestinian next to Israel, the world will demand just one state. They don't want to recognize Palestine anymore. They want to recognize one state that will be a real democratic one with the right to vote for the Palestinians as well as the Israelis. This is binational state, and I afraid that we are going to miss the days in which the world supported the two-state solution when we will be stuck with the one-state solution.
And bringing this issue back to the Sweden story, with me now is Paul Hirschen, spokesman for the Israeli Foreign Ministry. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, my pleasure. Nice to be with you.
And you know, we'd like to know, what is the reaction of the Israeli Foreign Ministry to Sweden's official recognition of a Palestinian state?
Well, first of all, we have recalled the ambassador for consultation, which, amongst other things, of course, is an expression to some degree of the upset and disappointment that we feel. We think that it's an unfortunate decision of Sweden, because this is precisely what makes bringing the Palestinians back to the negotiating table much more difficult. This is what makes the possibility of successfully concluding negotiations much less likely. And it's because that this kind of behavior, these kind of actions are exactly what polishes the illusion that the Palestinians have that they can get what they want without negotiating with Israel, and that they can get what they want without making the difficult compromises that we're both going to have. It's a classic example of good intentions founded on poor understanding, leading to a more dangerous situation in a volatile time and place.
So just to expand on that a little more, Sweden has recognized the peoplehood and the government of the Palestinians, and they've also proposed a 5-year aid strategy plan with granting billions of kroner of aid to the Palestinians. So you feel that they're undermining the peace process, because according to Sweden, they feel they're helping it?
Well, there's no question they're undermining the peace process. They have set it back. They've set back the possibility of convincing the Palestinians to come to the table. That's precisely what I said to you. You polish the illusion that the Palestinians can get what they want without negotiating, and that the Palestinians can get what they want without making the very difficult compromises that we're both going to have to make. And not only the Palestinians, and certainly not only Israel, both of us. And you make it less likely that a deal will ever be done.
I see. Well, Paul Hirschen, thank you very much for speaking with us this evening. So what do we make of this response? And as we know, negotiations aren't actually taking place, and who knows, may not take place for quite some time.
Well, the problem is the point of departure. And the point of departure is that anyone who thinks that you can divide the sovereignty between the river and the sea is setting both people up for massive bloodshed. We've seen recently in the summer what the significance is of a short border abutting our sparsely populated rural south if you withdraw Israeli control from the territory. Now we're probably going to find out what it means. You have a 500-kilometer border abutting your densely populated urban area with your only international airport in mortar range. I just cannot believe that anyone who has the slightest loyalty towards Israel would advocate such a disastrous recipe. But I want to say something about the foreign ministry. I believe that what's happened with Sweden is the results of decades of dereliction of duty by the Israeli government. They have totally ignored the issue of public diplomacy. They've treated it with disregard and disrespect. Israel today spends less than what a medium to large size company in Israel spends on promoting fast foods and snacks. That's their global expenditure. Now, if you're not investing in conveying your position, there's very little reason to expect it to be conveyed. If Israel were to allot 1% of a state budget, that would be $1 billion. With $1 billion, you can do a lot of things. But Israel's losing support because the people in charge of Israeli public diplomacy don't want to win the fight, because they, like Yariv Oppenheimer, have bought into the Palestinian narrative at the expense of the Zionist narrative. I would challenge anyone anyone, no matter what his military rank is, no matter what his diplomatic rank is, to draw a line which will give Israel minimum security, which will allow for safe passage of traffic on Highway 6, which will allow for safe takeoff and landing of airports, of airplanes at Ben Gurion Airport, which will obviate the possibility of tunnels under the separation barrier into Greater Tel Aviv. There's no such line.
So you don't believe in a two-state solution?
Of course not. Who could believe in the two-state solution? How is it going to work? I challenge anyone to draw a tentative border, and without assuming the definite occurrence of the best-case scenario, how would Israel survive? How will Israel survive the kind of reality that we see in Sderot?
Right.
I respect this opinion, and this opinion, I just wish Netanyahu will say it out loud as well, because what Netanyahu is trying to do, and also the foreign ministry, is to play in both part of the game. They are saying, on the one hand, we support the two-state solution. We just want the Palestinians to come back to the negotiation. This is what is so scary for the foreign ministry, that the Palestinians are not coming back to the negotiations. They are not speaking about what Israel did in order to prevent a continue of negotiation.
But let me because I actually agree with him.
So okay, well, if we
an agreement,
thank
we'll
you.
Take it.
But so I think that these are all excuses. And on the other hand, Israel is doing its best in order to prevent the two-state solution from happening, not just by not speaking with the Palestinians and trying to promote it, but also to support the settlers and the settler movement in order to make it impossible in the future to disconnect ourselves from the Palestinians and to have these two identities. And when we speak about Zionism, Zionism is not just a Jewish state in Israel. Zionism is also a democratic state. And how you can fit in a democratic values into this one-state idea, how you can fit in the fact that millions of Palestinians that are going to be under your control like today are going to remain they will not be a minority, they will be almost half, but without the basic right to vote like any other country in the world, including, by the way, the non-democratic countries that are still giving the population the right to vote, even if it's a fake election. This is something that the right wing has no.
That's a fake option, because those are not the only two options. And I've written about it extensively. There's a third option, which will allow Israel to address both the demographic and the geographic imperatives, because to continue to survive.
And where is the compromise on the democratic values?
Because
if you are not an equal citizens, if you are not voting for the same parliament,
the two-state
so
solution,
this is not democracy.
The two-state solution will bring about the collapse of democracy in Israel.
I disagree with you. The opposite.
You've been wrong ever since the Oslo process. You've been wrong. Why would you think you'd be right now?
What was the alternative to Oslo? To continue the fighting? What was the alternative? The first Intifada is my personal dream. We were in the middle of a very bloody
at the end of the Shamil government. The Shamil government, the Intifada was dead.
That's not true.
What gave wind into the Intifada's sails was our withdrawal. Was the possibility that Palestinians had for getting military-grade explosives.
That the Palestinians are going to accept a deal that you and I will never accept? Do you really believe that the Palestinians will be ready to get less than equal citizenship or their own state? I disagree with you. They are human beings like us, and they will demand the same things that the Zionist movement demand.
What state in the Arab world would be a role model for the Palestinian state? What are you talking about? What state would be a role model for them?
I don't.
Yemen,
by
Syria,
Egypt. By the way, I think that this is their business.
It's not your business, because it's not because it's not your business. It's because they are on the doorstep of Tel Aviv, and every single time. Land for Peace formula has been implied. Oh yes, great. Look what's
Jordan.
Excuse me, Jordan. What Land for Peace? You see what's happening in Sinai. Sinai is going to become a murderous, brutal no man's land with the Egyptians. When the Ethiopians start pumping water out of their dam on the Blue Nile,
so Egypt will have the peace.
Okay, I want to come back.
The peace agreement will fall apart anyway.
I would like to come back now to the two-state solution that you, of course, have said that you support, and many believe this is possibly the only way to bring about a true peace in this region. But how can Israelis trust Palestinians when, for instance, we see Hamas ruling the Gaza Strip? Who is the partner for Israel here?
First of all, I think it's a question about what Israel wants to achieve by itself, for itself. And it's not up to the Palestinian. And I don't think that the two-state solution is just for peace. It's first in order to keep ourselves as a Jewish democratic state. I don't think that we should dismantle the Israeli army. I don't think that we should allow the Palestinians to have their own army. I think that we need to...
that one agree.
No.
Who's going to defend the Palestinians from external threats? If they demilitarize, who's going to defend the Palestinians
You can make allies like Jordan.
Jordan will defend the Palestinians. And if Jordan becomes an Islamic state,
have a huge army and
who's going to defend the Palestinians? Who's going to defend the Palestinians?
The international community. Like who defend Kuwait? Who defend Kuwait?
What?
Who defend other places?
Exactly. Who defended
Kuwait?
Community? America,
you can laugh, but it worked in the past in the Arab world. And I'm saying, and the Palestinians accept it, because for the Palestinian, what they want is the political right and not the ability to attack and to destroy Israel. And I'm not saying there is a chance that there will be some things that will not work the way I wish it will
What's
work.
Plan B?
If this will...
What's Plan B?
To have Israeli forces,
what does that mean?
Army that will protect Israel the same like we...
How will they protect?
Like we are doing in Gaza, like we are doing in Lebanon.
You really believe that you will maintain?
And it will be much easier than you think.
The country if Tel Aviv and
but what alternative? What alternative? To continue the occupation and to be isolated? And not to have a democratic state?
That's not
I still didn't hear
because
your solution.
Because you're not listening, and I'm not sure at this time to go into it.
You said the buzzword there at that moment, that Israel is isolated, and you mentioned this a bit earlier in the debate, that Israel is perhaps more and more becoming isolated in the international community, and with considering the reactions we've heard from U.S. officials, for instance, yesterday with the famous word, which I will not repeat, the U.S.-Israeli relations are not perhaps at their best. Would we possibly see the Obama administration reacting favorably of the Palestinians?
Well, my point of departure is completely different. I don't think that we can judge the Obama administration's reaction giving our feeble public diplomacy. We've done nothing to mobilize the huge support that Israel has in America. Israel has a 4-to-1 advantage in public opinion in America over the Palestinians. We're not mobilizing that. We are letting the State Department, who are wedded to the Palestinian narrative, influence the White House and dictate policy, because there's no pushback. If there was an assertive Israel public diplomacy for mobilizing public opinion across the campuses in the United States, across the elites in the United States, things would look different, because we're trying to fight a diplomatic battle without gearing for it and without arming ourselves for it. So if we wanted to, we could mobilize huge support to prevent any anti-Israeli initiatives by the Obama administration. We're not doing it. We're spending virtually nothing on public diplomacy. Our foreign ministry is very ineffective. And I can't understand how support for the establishment of another Muslim-majority tyranny is gaining international support, because that's what Mr. Oppenheim is preaching.
We will be continuing this discussion shortly, but we are going live now to East Jerusalem, where our diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev is standing by. Tal, we understand that things are heating up there. Can you expand on that?
Well, yes, Meredith, in the past hour, it seems like the occasional clashes and the occasional disruptions are intensifying and becoming more and more frequent all around us, in all of the neighborhoods around us. We are here in Abu Tor, but also in Ras El Amud, Silwan, and we're hearing reports also from Wadi Joz. There are disruptions, fireworks shot in the air, and groups of young Palestinians from the East Jerusalem neighborhoods trying to disrupt the heavy military and police presence in the neighborhoods. And of course, this is all expected to intensify in the upcoming hours until 12 o'clock at midnight, when Muataz Hijazi, the suspect of the assassination attempt of Yehuda Glick, will be brought to final rest in his funeral, and that will intensify. And of course, all eyes are actually anticipating tomorrow, the Friday day of prayer. Is, as we mentioned earlier, the Israeli government did decide to try and bring down the flames and did decide to open up the Temple Mount complex compound for prayer tomorrow for Muslims over the age of 50. This is definitely a very tense situation, and the Israeli Prime Minister has been holding consultations all day, and he's also been under quite a lot of international pressure, both from the EU and the US. The State Department just a short while ago says that the US Secretary of State will be calling Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, later on tonight to discuss the violence, and there is a lot of pressure on Netanyahu to try and bring down the flames in this volatile situation here in the capital of Jerusalem.
Well, Tashleva, thank you very much. Live there from Jerusalem. We did hear and see what appeared to be fireworks behind you as things do heat up. Thank you, Tal. And so we've heard now from our correspondent there in Jerusalem that the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will be calling Netanyahu. Now, what do you feel Netanyahu should do at this point, considering he is receiving all of this pressure from abroad? Dr. Sherman.
Well, I think concessions only fan the flames, because if you have a certain position or a certain right, and you give it up so that the other side doesn't undertake violence, then you get your next right. And the other side's already learned the lesson. If he threatens violence, you'll give up a further right. Basically, there can be two conflictual situations. One conflictual situation is when you make a concession and your counterpart acknowledges your concession and feels obliged to make a counter concession. And so by a series of concessions and counter concessions, the whole process converges into some amicable arrangement. But this is not the situation you have here. You make a concession, and the other side interprets it as a sign of weakness. So it makes a further demand, and you make another concession to try and placate him. And so instead of converging, the system diverges until either one side is totally defeated, or it explodes into violence. And that's what we're seeing now. We're going to make more and more concessions. The other side is going to get bolder and bolder. And until the violence becomes so large scale, there's going to be massive bloodshed here. Anyone advocating a Palestinian state, just as the people who advocated Oslo, are going to have massive bloodshed on their hands.
I think that what we just heard is something from the 80s. Like, this is a whole new a play of cards, and we should hide our cards and not saying what is on the agenda.
What's that got to do with it?
No, I hear it, and let me please finish my argument. I think that this is a very old-fashioned way to look at things. People that are risking their life and they are coming now to the street to fight with Israeli soldiers, I condemn it, but I need to understand why they are doing it in order to prevent it. These people have nothing to lose. These people are frustrated. These people lost hope. These people don't want to be citizens of Israel, and they don't want to be under Israeli occupation. And when they saw that the negotiation with Israel collapsed, when they saw that Israel continued to change the situation and to make it more complicated, when they see that they are losing their hope to get independence, the only option for them is to risk their life, to be put in jail, and to come and to clash Israel and to fight Israeli soldiers and policemen. Again, I think that they should not go to violence, but if we want to stop violence, we need to understand it. It's not that the Palestinians feel that they are now gaining so many things, or they are so happy they are firing fireworks in order to celebrate. They are doing it because of despair. Because like any other citizens, including Zionist movement, they feel that if they are under occupation, so they will fight. If they will see the end, if they will see...
Are the Palestinians worse off for the people in Yemen? Are the Palestinians worse off?
The Palestinians are much closer to the Israeli society than any other Arab communities in the region, and they would like to see
because they suffered under occupation?
Independence. They don't
so
want to be
their life is better
under
because of
control.
Israeli occupation? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying
life is better under because of Israeli
lose,
occupation?
And after we close the door for real negotiation, this is the only option for them to act. I disagree with that, but in order to prevent it, we need to understand it.
Please, let me read you 3 lines. We shall not enter Palestine with its soil covered in sand. We shall enter it with its soil saturated in blood. That was NASA in 1967, before the Six-Day War.
I can give you so many quotes.
What Palestine was he talking about? Not only that. Ahmed Shukeri. Why is it not serious? That's the thing, you don't believe what they say.
The Israeli senior politician today, Naftali Bennett, offered to ask the Palestinian to make coffee for him. So believe me, you can find nasty things and really stupid things
excuse me,
being said by many Israelis top politicians. The issue is what we should do.
What we should do is realize that deterrence is a doctrine of
I think that
nonviolence.
Israel should replace its prime minister because Netanyahu got the chance to change the history, but he didn't do anything.
And should Abbas be replaced as well?
I don't think so. Abbas is still speaking about the two-state solution, about a peace agreement, and about the fact that he recognized the right of Israel to exist. Israel government is speaking very vaguely about the right of Palestinians to have someday something like a state, but doing exactly the opposite. And I think I have no expectation from Netanyahu. At least he can manage the conflict now and to be responsible. But for the long run, there should be a political change in Israel. Otherwise, we will continue to be part of the Palestinian in the same state, and we will never be able to disconnect ourselves.
We will have to finish on this point. We have run out of time, gentlemen. Reva Oppenheimer and Dr. Sherman, thank you both very much for being here this evening for this debate. And we're going out for a 2-minute break. Stay tuned for more of the special edition of the News Today.